Welcome to InvestorStockGuide's Risk Calculator tutorial video. The Risk Calculator is a very important tool I developed which will help you determine how many shares you should be buying based on your investment and risk tolerance for each stock. It should be used every time you purchase shares. In this video, FLT will be the featured stock. The first step is determining what type of investor you are. Simply click on the user guide and follow the simple guidelines. This section displays 4 different types of investors and the corresponding percentage range of dollars you may want to risk. The types of investors are as follows. A beginner investor is a first-time investor to the stock market. A conservative investor is one who is not comfortable with risking very much. An average investor is one who has a few years of investing in the markets. An aggressive investor is a young individual or one with many years of experience in the stock market. Please note, this is only a guide. If you're categorized as an average investor, it shows to risk between 15% and 25%. If this is too high, then you should only risk what you are comfortable with. If your comfort zone is 10%, then you should only risk that amount. This table shows you stock price ranges and a range of investment dollars. Each price range corresponds to its particular range of investment dollars. Using FLT as the example, the stock price of $40.65 falls into this price range, and the investment would be anywhere between $100,000 to $150,000. If the investment dollars are too high, there are buttons at the bottom of the table to change those figures to which you may be more comfortable with. Once you have determined which type of investor you are and the percentage you are willing to risk, you will need to know the price of the stock and how much you want to invest in that particular stock. As mentioned above, FLT will be the featured stock, and it is a buy at $40.65. Assuming you are an aggressive investor, you will be investing $150,000 into FLT with a risk of 30%, which equates to $45,000. Since there are up to 4 separate transactions for each stock, the risk calculator breaks down the total amount invested into a 40%, 30%, 20%, 10% split. Here is an example. Investment, $150,000. First transaction, $60,000. Second transaction, $45,000. Third transaction, $30,000. Fourth transaction, $15,000. Since you are an aggressive investor, the maximum you will risk is $45,000. The risk calculator will warn you if the risk exceeds this level. If this happens, you will need to adjust the number of shares manually for the risk to be under $45,000. I'll explain this later in the video. The symbol FLT is entered here. Then click Enter. In this box, you enter $150,000, which is the total amount invested if FLT is purchased in 4 transactions. The risk is 30% and is found by using the scroll down bar, as shown. Next, the stock price is entered, which is $40.65. Then the stop price at $33.23 is typed into this box. The risk calculator determines the initial amount of shares to buy is 1,476. The total risk, shown here, is $45,000, followed by $60,000, which is the maximum allowable investment for this first transaction. Here, it shows the investment was exactly $59,999.40. Next, the risk taken for this first transaction is $10,951.92. which means there is $34,048.08 of risk remaining to spread over the next 3 transactions. The calculator determines you'll be risking $7.42 for each 1,476 shares purchased. Click this button to add FLT to the stock monitor. Once FLT is added to the stock monitor, there are only 2 things you'll need to enter to have the risk calculator determine the amount of shares for the second, third, and fourth transactions. and they are the stock price and the stop loss price. The second buy for FLT occurred on August 19th at a price of $42.54, entered here. Stop loss price of $34.62, entered here. The calculator determined to buy an additional 1,057 shares of FLT. Then click Save. The third buy occurred on September 9th at a price of $44.12 with a stop loss price of $36.81. The calculator determined to buy an additional 679 shares. The fourth and final buy for FLT occurred on September 16th at a price of $44.63 with a stop loss of $37.29. The calculator determined to buy an additional 336 shares. As you can see here, the total invested was $149,917.34. The total shares purchased in the fourth transaction is 3,548. The total risk taken was $26,753.09, well below the $45,000. There will be times when the risk taken will exceed the maximum risk allowed. If this happens, a warning will appear as shown, and you will need to manually adjust the amount of shares lower, like so. Now the risk taken does not exceed the maximum risk allowed. You are now ready to start using the risk calculator. Remember, after each additional buy or short, you will need to cancel the current stop loss order and enter a new one with the new stop price along with the additional shares. For example, with FLT, the first transaction was for a purchase of 1,476 shares with a stop price of $33.23. The second transaction was for an additional 1,057 shares with a stop price of $34.62. The first stop loss order for 1,476 shares at $33.23 will be canceled and a new order of 2,533 shares with a stop price of $34.62 will be entered. You will need to repeat these steps if you buy additional shares for a third and fourth transaction. This concludes the risk calculator tutorial video. If you haven't done so already, please watch the tutorial video on the weekly newsletter. Thank you.